Hello, good evening and a very warm welcome to the Hot Seat. In the Hot Seat today to discuss the state of affairs of the government is the former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Mr. W.A. Wijewardena. Good evening and welcome to the Hot Seat. Thank you for being on the Hot Seat. Mr. Wijewardena, after a long drawn-out battle of public concern and civil society and so on, the governor of the central bank, the former governor's term, was not renewed, or he wasn't given a new contract. We have instead Dr. Indrajit Kumaraswamy. Can we declare ourselves to be happy? Are you happy?
Well, of course, I am very happy for us because Dr. Indrajit Kumaraswamy has worked with me in the central bank. He is a fine economist, and he is actually fearless economist when it comes to economic policy, and he criticized the previous government's policies, he criticized the current government policies. Therefore, he has proved himself to be a very independent man, and with that respect, I think it's a good choice that the President has made by appointing him as the Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka.
And how much of this is a reflection of the people's concern that something was amiss at the central bank?
Well, the reason is for us now, of course, everybody is aware of the various irregularities that had taken place in the central bank during the last 15 months or so. And there was public criticism, there was the media like you, you came up very openly and you criticized it. There was a criticism by the opposition. And with all these criticisms, the President has listened to the criticisms, and he had decided not to renew the term of the former governor, and instead he has appointed a person who is acceptable to all the people now.
Indeed. Just looking back at that bond, we call it a bond scandal, but in that bond matter, I've examined some figures. In the Cabral years in which that company was given its license, the value, the turnover of the amount of bonds taken through that company was 27 million. Now, in the 5 months from January till May, the same company under a different governor, the central bank took from them 1,900 plus million worth of business from the same company. It's an enormous difference from 27 million to 1,900 plus million. It smacks from the outside, it smacks of favoritism.
Well, of course, in the bond market there are 3 big players, the Bank of Ceylon, National Savings Bank, and the Employees Provident Fund. All other players coming from the private sector, they are very small players, and that's why the particular primary dealer company you have just mentioned, the Perpetual Treasuries, had not been very active in the bond market of Sri Lanka, and they had just maintained the minimum requirement needed for them to continue as a primary dealer. And they were doing that particular type of business with the central bank, and of course the present information available in the public domain reveals that the particular primary dealer company has become number 1 among the private sector primary dealer companies today. From an insignificant position, they have become one of the leading private sector held primary dealer companies. So, which means there's a sufficient and substantial growth during that period. Of course, we'll have to then give credit to them for that purpose because they have been in business.
They've been in business. They've been very active. But to find out and to get to the bottom of whether there was any favoritism or sort of official patronage, would you think that something on the lines of an independent forensic audit of their business should be conducted to find out if they had benefited from so-called privileged information.
Yeah, what happens in the primary dealer bond market for us is that all primary dealers should have equal access to information.
Right.
So that is how we are going to make a fair deal among the primary dealers.
Right.
So with that respect, if a particular primary dealer company has been accused of having inside information about the amount to be issued in a particular bond issue,
Yeah.
and therefore they can benefit out of that, the particular factor has to be investigated by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka immediately.
Indeed.
To find out whether there has been some leakage of information
Right.
from the public debt department of the central bank to this particular primary dealer.
And
So
what-
that is why this forensic audit that you are referring to
Yeah.
should be conducted, and it should be conducted by the monetary board of the central bank,
I
not
see.
by the government.
Right.
Yeah.
And what are the remedies that's available to the public debt department if they find that there was some form of leakage or seepage of sensitive data?
Well, in the first instance, the particular officers who may have leaked that information will have to be taken to courts.
Right.
Because it's a fraud.
Right.
And of course, they have violated the provisions of the Monetary Law Act,
Right.
where they are not supposed to leak that information to any particular person.
Right.
So therefore, they are guilty of an offence, and therefore they should be taken to court.
Right.
Second requirement is that the Monetary Board has to take action to prevent the recurrence of the similar leakage of information,
Right.
because it will affect the other primary dealers of the country. So if you want to build up a fair playing ground for all the primary dealers,
Yeah.
all primary dealers should have equal access to information which should be made available to them in public domain.
And Mr. Vijayawardena, sorry to rabbit on about this matter, but it is a matter that has shocked the conscience of the nation. And the Supreme Court last week or 2 weeks ago said that their conscience was shocked in the matter of the coal purchase. But in this matter, where the bond is concerned, I was careful not to use the word inside information, because many times we've had government ministers saying that and in fact the former governor himself saying that there is no such thing as insider trading. Well, we understand that. But in this matter, bonds are supposed to be VAT-free, tax-free. But it is a matter that is within the banking system. So doesn't it make it quite easy, relatively easy, to see where the money came, where the money went?
Yeah, it is easy. I mean, because what happens is, after a person has purchased bonds in the primary market from the central bank,
Yes.
subsequent deals are done through either Bloomberg or through the Reuters
Right.
trading portal.
Right.
So therefore, the audit trails of the
Is easy,
changes in the ownership is already available in the computer system.
Excellent. We'll take a short break and come back to the hot seat. Don't go away. This is the hot seat. Welcome back to the hot seat, where we're joined by Mr. W.A. Vijayawardena, the former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. So, Mr. Vijayawardena, the audit trails are quite easy to, it's transparent, the trail is there.
Yeah.
In as much as the Auditor General has passed his comments, and he speaks of a lack of a primary duty of care, or in other words, he said that the governor, well, at that time, the governor did not act in a manner that was expected of a governor. He also said, the Auditor General also said, that he is not qualified, and it is not in his remit to mention whether these were illegal or other matters. He left that to other agencies, quite rightly, I suppose. Does this make the Auditor General a very unpopular figure in government?
Yeah, the job of the Auditor General for us is to function as the third eye of the government.
Right.
Because you have two eyes, and you can see things that are visible with your two eyes,
Right.
and there are things that are happening which are not visible to you.
Right.
So that is why in every country, democratic country, we have a separate audit office which has to function as the third eye of the government. So therefore, if the Auditor General comes up with a certain observation.
Yeah.
That observation should not be taken lightly by the government, because it is in the interest of the government to pursue the matter further.
Right.
So in this particular case, the report that Auditor General has submitted to COP is not available in public domain.
Right.
But of course, the copies of the report has now been leaked, and it's available to many people
Indeed.
who have access to internet today.
Yeah, indeed.
And some of the observations that he has made is that he actually goes by the numbers that have been presented to him.
Yes, so he's talking facts and figures.
Facts and figures, and he has analyzed the numbers in terms of the good audit practices.
Right.
And he has come up with certain observations.
Right.
So it is up to the COP and Parliament to notice those observations and take further action which he has recommended. Now, for example, if the Auditor General says that the government has not, Governor of the Central Bank has not acted with due professional diligence,
Yeah.
when he immediately authorized the Public Debt Department to go for 10 billion worth of treasury bonds in this particular bond issue in February 2015,
Yeah.
there, what the Auditor General has meant is, the governor has simply ignored the fact that there were other alternative methods of raising the same amount of money at a cheaper cost to the government of Sri Lanka. The reason is the particular cash requirement of the government amounted to about 20 billion
Yeah.
was a liquidity requirement of the government.
Right.
And for a liquidity requirement, normally a prudential investment manager will not go for a 30-year bond,
Right.
which will bind the future governments of Sri Lanka to pay interest at 12.5% continuously over the 30-year period. Because it's a short-term cash requirement.
Yeah.
And if you have a short-term cash requirement, you have to go for a short-term financial facility,
Right.
where you just meet the short-term cash requirement method. So that is where I think the Auditor General has faulted the previous governor for lacking professional due diligence required of a governor of a central bank.
The Prime Minister, in the aftermath of the concerns that were raised by the media, civil society and so on, in the aftermath of that, the Prime Minister did make a statement in Parliament in which he said that I ordered the system of auctions as opposed to direct placement. Now, from what we understand, in the previous governors, under Governor Cabral, we were told that there was an auction and there was also an element of direct placement. But the auction served to obtain the average yield, the weighted average rate, and that any extra money that was, oversubscribed money was placed with those other primary dealers, but at the weighted average rate. So not at the rate that they necessarily asked for. So if either you took it or you left it. Which do you think, is it, if it's a straight auction, which is more beneficial to the people in terms of the optimum way of borrowing?
In a perfectly operating market for us, the auction system is the best.
Right.
But of course, I believe that the Prime Minister has been misinformed by the central bank.
Right.
Because these direct placements were not started during the tenure of Governor Cabral as governor. It was started in 1997.
That's right.
When the primary dealer system was introduced by Governor S. Jayawardena.
Right.
And he had a very good reason to determine that some of the auctions should not be conducted, because he said there are 16 primary dealers who are not a perfectly competitive market, but an oligopoly.
Right.
And in an oligopoly, what Governor S. Jayawardena thought was that the primary dealers can get together in a cohesive manner, and they can try to increase the interest rates to their own benefit.
Correct.
To prevent that, he said, we will accept only the bids that are acceptable to us at a given rate of interest.
Right.
Beyond that, we will offer them the option of subscribing at the weighted average interest rate.
Right.
And that is why he brought the Employees Provident Fund, which is not a primary dealer, as an institution which has the right to bid at the primary auctions.
Right.
So, Mr. S. Jayawardena's contention was that if there is a perfectly competitive market, you can have auction system.
Right.
But if the market is run by oligopolists,
Yeah.
some 16 primary dealers who have personal interest in jacking up the interest rate,
Yes.
then the government, the central bank should have a weapon to prevent the increase in the interest rates in the market.
Which is where the weighted average...
Weighted average. So what happened was the central, in a particular auction, if the primary dealers were trying to increase the rate of interest to their own benefit, the central bank will accept from the auction only the bids which have been bid at the acceptable rate to the central bank.
I see.
Anything above that, the primary dealers are left to subscribe at the weighted average interest rate of that particular auction, or if all the bids in that particular auction has been rejected, the weighted average rate of the previous auction. So
Right.
therefore the primary dealers could not benefit from any inside information because of that particular practice.
Right.
So what happened in the particular February 2015 auction was that they just gave up that particular weapon that was available to central bank.
And they gave it up.
Gave it up, and the Prime Minister has been misinformed.
Indeed. And perhaps the Prime Minister is not aware of the figure that I mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
that of that particular company's amount of business done with the central bank. The take-up
Yeah.
from that company during the Cabral time was 27 million rupees, and which is rather an insignificant amount. And in the 5 months thereafter was 1,900 plus million rupees. Now, that's not taking into account the second
But of course,
bond.
at the time the Prime Minister made that statement in Parliament, this particular information was not available for us. So we have to, in fairness to Prime Minister, we have to say that the development that you have mentioned may have taken place subsequent to that.
I see.
Not at the time the Prime Minister made this statement in Parliament.
Well, he may not have been aware of the figures.
Yeah, he may. I mean, this information is not available to even the Monetary Board of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, because this is kept by the Public Debt Department as classified information, and that is why there was this problem with the Auditor General when he asked for this information.
Indeed.
The Central Bank had refused the information.
Doesn't
in the first instance.
it underscore then the real need for the Prime Minister and for this government to rely on that third eye, the eye of the Auditor
Exactly,
General?
that is why it is necessary for us, because the third eye is the most important factor here. The third eye functions as an independent observer. He is not actually a party to this particular transaction.
Indeed.
He is an independent observer, and as we know about the Auditor General's department, it is staffed with professional people who have been trained in the art and science of auditing public sector accounts.
I would venture to say that the Auditor General is impartial, incisive and decisive.
Not only Auditor General, because I have come across all other staff in the Auditor General's department for us, they are all highly professional people. I will have to give that certificate to all of them.
Wonderful. We'll take another short break from the hot seat. We'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back to the hot seat, where we're joined by Mr. W.A. Wijewardena, the former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Enough of doom and gloom and corruption. Shall we look, can you, at the top of your head, can you say, what do you think the plus points, what has this government of Yapalana achieved?
Well, there are a number of plus points for us this government has introduced. Number one is that now people are free to criticize the policies of the government of Sri Lanka, because which facility people didn't enjoy in the previous regime.
Right.
Because that is one of the important elements in creating an active and vibrant democracy.
Yeah.
And as the Prime Minister in his election manifesto in August made the announcement that he will deliver economic democracy to Sri Lankans, he had actually allowed the people to speak out.
Right.
Which is a very important requirement in a democracy, because when the people are silent, what happens is there are all kinds of underground operations that would seek to undermine the activities of the government.
Right. So
but when people are in the open and when they speak, government also benefit from that.
Right. So they've put that in place.
Yeah.
and they're probably in the whole process also re-establishing the independence of the judiciary. There are continuous claims about the way that the FCID operate and so on. But nevertheless, as the Prime Minister and his ministers have been pointing out from time to time, it isn't easy because in the previous administration and in the years before that, the judiciary's independence has been compromised, and so it takes time to build it all up.
Yeah.
But apart from that, when you meet business people, they say, they quite often say, nothing is happening. And I pushed one of them to answer the question, what do they mean by nothing is happening? And what it transpires is, what they say is, there's nothing new that's happening. It's all stuff that's happened before. What do you say about that? Is that true?
The Prime Minister, you may recall, Faraz, issued his economic policy statement in November last year, 2 weeks before the budget.
Yeah.
And that particular economic policy statement, in my opinion, is a very comprehensive economic policy statement covering all aspects of the economy. What happened was, the budget that was presented to Parliament 2 weeks after that had not actually taken the particular philosophy which Prime Minister had announced in his economic policy statement, and therefore there was no subsequent activities by the government agencies, various departments, ministries and so forth, to take it forward. Now the Prime Minister has to issue a separate next new economic policy statement in August this year.
Right.
So, which is actually, which makes it, it's a nonsense, because you have issued one economic policy statement where you had pronounced the economic policy of the government in the next 5-year period. Now, instead of taking any action on the statement that had already been issued, you are supposed to issue a new statement again in August this year.
Right.
So this is where I think the people feel that nothing new is happening in the country.
I see. Yeah. Just moving on to corruption and working towards the eradication of corruption. If we look at the fundamentals in Sri Lanka, I think a cabinet minister earns what, about 75,000 rupees?
Salary,
right?
that is his salary.
That's his salary.
Yeah.
And then he has a whole host of benefits, including housing,
security officers,
secretaries,
telephones,
entertainment, drivers, duty-free permits, and so on.
Yeah.
They all necessarily have a cost. But if we look at the model in Singapore, of which so much of reliance, every Sri Lankan government or politician is quite fond of saying that, of looking at Singapore. But in Singapore, I think the Singapore Prime Minister is the world's highest paid head of state, at about $1.7 million an annum.
Yeah.
Now, a cabinet minister or a minister in the Singaporean government receives $850,000. Now, that works out at current rates around 9 million Sri Lankan rupees a month.
Yeah.
Why can't we pay our politicians, our ministers, a good, handsome salary, in which, like their Singaporean colleagues, they have to take care of all the other expenses? So, you know, cars and secretaries and admin and drivers and God knows what, whatever your cost of being a minister is met by the minister himself, because he's earning 9 million plus every month. Now, what if they were to do that here?
Well,
even if they want security, they could pay the security.
Exactly, Faraz, what you say is in line with the transparency that we have been advocating under economic democracy.
Yeah.
Because whenever you appoint somebody to a private company, the company looks at the employee as the cost to the company. That is the total amount that the company will spend on behalf of him.
Yeah.
Similarly, when we appoint a minister in Sri Lanka, we will have to again look at the minister as the cost to the taxpayer.
Indeed.
So what we have been doing in Sri Lanka is completely opposite of what Singapore had been doing.
Yeah.
Instead of paying a minister a decent, good salary,
Yeah.
we are actually paying peanuts to ministers.
So it's back to that old saying, isn't it? If you pay peanuts,
You get monkeys. Yeah, this is what Lee Kuan Yew said, his famous statement. So if you calculate the total cost which a taxpayer would incur on behalf of a minister in Sri Lanka, it comes pretty much close to what you are mentioned about
saying.
the Singaporean people.
Yes.
Because I have calculated it comes to about more than 6 million rupees per month, because of if you take all the facts, all the facilities, all the perks that
As much as that.
that we have granted to a minister in Sri Lanka.
That
So
that might be an interesting article for you to write.
I
Mr.
have already
Wijewardene.
written about it, Faraz, and in fact, I have asked the Auditor General to do a proper audit
that.
inquiry of that, because
Right.
Auditor General will have to look at it as the cost to the taxpayers rather than the salary that we pay to a minister, which is a peanut.
Well, it's something that the public needs to consider and Parliament needs to consider.
Exactly.
Because it may go a long way towards eradicating corruption and political patronage and so on. Mr. Wijewardene, thank you very much for being in the hot seat today. We appreciate that and we look forward to welcoming you on our network another time.
You are welcome, Faraz.
Thank you. And we'll be back same time, same place next week. Do stay tuned to the hot seat.